Good evening. My name is Zina Sherrick, a co-chair of the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, also known as PI. I'm also a parent member of the Parents as Partners for Mental Health and Wellbeing at the Toronto District School Board. Welcome, and thank you to all parents and our Director of Education for the Toronto District School Board for joining us this evening. For our conversation this evening, returning to learning, promoting and protecting mental health and well-being relationships, the 3 R's, resilience, relationships, routines. This evening is an event jointly hosted by the Toronto District School Board and the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee. Our presenters this evening are from the professional services staff and student equity workers of the Toronto District School Board. Before we begin this evening, we would like to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I'd like to share, just before I introduce our next guest, how important this conversation is and how important it is to me as a parent, understanding that mental health and well-being is part of our children's learning and part of their whole environment. So thank you very much again for being here this evening. I would now like to introduce the Toronto District School Board's Director of Education, Carleen Jackson.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Parents as Partners virtual conference. My name is Carleen Jackson, and I'm the Interim Director of Education for the Toronto District School Board. Before we begin, I want to thank the Parent and Community Engagement Office for planning this great event and for inviting me to participate. It's a pleasure to join you today for today's conversation about mental health and well-being. As you know, this year has been nothing short of challenging for many of our school communities. Aside from the physical impacts of COVID-19, this pandemic has taken a toll on the mental health and well-being of so many. More than ever, student mental health and well-being is an important part of student success and a priority for the TDSB, especially as we plan to safely reopen schools for the first time since March. Returning to school after many months away will require time to address the social and emotional needs of students, on top of continuing to provide ongoing support for those who need it. From our student survey, we know that about half of the students were concerned about getting used to school routines again. About 1/3 of students were concerned about getting used to in-person interactions with teachers and peers and not being able to interact with friends like they used to, as well as coping with their fears and anxiety. This evening, you will hear from various speakers that will help to address many of the concerns that were expressed by you, parents and guardians, in the Return to School survey. You will also learn about the new and ongoing supports we will be offering students, including those to help students transition back to school, professional support services, and various online supports that will be available to students and their families. I hope that you find these conversations informative and engaging. Thank you once again to everyone who has helped to plan this great event. I am now pleased to introduce our mental health and well-being lead, Heather Johnson. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Carleen. That was a great introduction, and we're happy to be here today to really try and share some information that we hope people will find helpful as we continue on this journey. My name is Heather Johnson, and I'm a mental health lead here at the TDSB.
I'm Shelley Moretti, and I'm a psychologist here at the TDSB. Good evening, everyone.
So joining this evening are members of our TDSB support services. Can you put the next slide, Margaret, please? Joining us this evening are people from social work, psychology, speech and language, occupational and physiotherapy, and child and youth services. We also have our student equity program advisors, some of us joining. The presentation tonight, people have already heard a few times, is called Return to Learning, What's Next? And we're hoping to really look at how we can promote and protect mental health and well-being at this time. The three areas that we're going to talk about are resilience, relationships, and routines. After the presentations, we'll offer you an opportunity to join a breakout group, and I believe that people were able to sign up for those as they joined in, so we can engage in a smaller group discussion. And the groups are kindergarten to grade 3, grade 4 to grade 8. We have a high school group. We have a developmentally delayed and ASD low incidence group. We have a special education group, another group around identity, belonging, and anti-Black racism. And our 7th group is mental health challenges. So if you have students who might be dealing with mental health challenges, it'll give us an opportunity to look at some of the things we've talked about tonight in terms of relationships and resilience and routines from the lens of those particular areas.
Next slide, please, Margaret. We have been in a pandemic for almost 6 months, and we're aware that we're living in really uncertain times, and this has created a different degree of challenge for everyone. Uncertainty and concern about the return to learning is a source of great stress for many parents and caregivers. We want to acknowledge how challenging this time has been and how difficult it continues to be, especially as we approach the beginning of a new school year. Parents and caregivers have real concerns about the safety and well-being of their children. Many of us here presenting tonight are also parents, and we understand your worries. Everyone has been working incredibly hard to balance family and work-life obligations and learning from home for our children. It certainly has not been easy, and there is no question that we are all doing the best we can. We appreciate your partnership now more than ever. We want parents and caregivers to know that you are definitely not alone when it comes to helping your children with the return to school or learning in whatever form that may take for you and your children. We are here to help. Our shared vision for supporting students and parents during this time puts the emphasis right where it should be on everyone's mental health and well-being. Next, please, Margaret. COVID has affected everything. I don't need to tell you that. School will not look as it did prior to the period of remote learning. And what we know about this seems to change by the hour. There will be a need for physical distancing, wearing masks. There's going to be changes to recess and lunch routines, and the list goes on and on. And it is possible that there may be a need for future transitions through learning at home as the pandemic evolves. All of this is understandably unsettling for students, parents, families, and staff alike. We need to consider that circumstances have varied for students during the period of school closures. Depending on one's experiences during the pandemic, this transition may either be more or less impactful on people's mental health and well-being. Next slide, please, Margaret. When all of this started, we learned how viruses spread and how to wash our hands like pros. Now we have to learn things about the impact of a pandemic on mental health and well-being. This is new learning for all of us. In the best of times, returning to school after a summer break can be awfully hard. In light of the extended school closure and uncertainty about plans for the return to school and learning, families and students are now faced with extra challenges. Caregivers and children may have many questions, many thoughts, and mixed feelings about the idea of returning to learning in whatever form that takes. Next, please.
As a parent or caregiver, it's really important to take care of yourself. Just as when you get on a plane, they say put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on someone younger or older than you. So as you continue to live with the ongoing uncertainty of the pandemic, it's important to find ways to support your own well-being. And I know that's not easy given what we've been living with. Often we feel guilty for taking that time just to focus on ourselves. I think as parents, that's a common feeling. And self-care, taking care of ourselves, can look different for everyone. But we know it really does make a difference. It can improve your energy, it can help you feel more joy, and refocus on what really is important to you. We also know that research shows that getting outside and being active and eating healthily, getting sleep and maintaining a daily schedule are important contributors to well-being. Next. As parent caregiver, you may ask, what can help at this time? Like, we all feel so helpless. What can I do that might make a difference? The best thing that we can do is to really maintain communication with our children and teens and to be patient and understanding. I know it sounds simple, but staying calm makes a difference. How calm you remain really impacts how your child is. Try to keep it simple. The COVID situation feels so overwhelming and complex. There's so much information coming at us all at once. You can really help your child by breaking it down into manageable parts and focusing on the things that are really important. Listen. Take the time to listen to what your child might say. Talk through how they're feeling, acknowledge how they're feeling, and help them to kind of label those emotions. And keeping information age appropriate. I think sometimes it's hard to know what to say. So answering their questions as factually as possible, but keep responses age appropriate is a great way to go. Limit exposure. We're bombarded in every form of media with all kinds of information, and sometimes having too much information is not helpful. There's a man on my street and he's always on his phone, and he and I have conversations about how that really isn't helpful for his mental health, but he finds it really hard not to, as a father of 3 young boys. It's important to be patient and understanding. You might notice behavior changes in your children, and your children might react differently to changes in routine and stress. And I don't know about you, but I've also, I call it kind of the COVID coaster of emotions going up and down. So also to be patient and understanding with ourselves, that we need to give ourselves a little breathing room as well. Next slide.
During the school closure, many professional support services staff created resources with a focus about protecting and promoting mental health and well-being. The resources were aimed at staff, educators, parents and caregivers, as well as our students. Just so families are aware, when you go on the TDSB homepage, there is a tab, a well-being tab. If you click on the well-being tab, you will find your way to our resources. And we hope you have the opportunity to check them out, because there are some great resources available to you on our website. Next, please. So in terms of our intentions for tonight's presentation, we have several, and we're very glad to have you along with us this evening. First, we would like to talk about and explore a concept known as social and emotional learning, and to talk about how these skills can be really helpful for your children in terms of uncertainty and managing uncertainty. And the other is to share practical strategies for supporting relationships, routines, and resilience. Next, please.
Social and emotional learning is the foundation of all good mental health and well-being, and it's something that we've only started to talk about more intentionally in the last 5 years, I'd say. As parents, we often think about how our children learn and do in school, but social emotional learning is about all the other parts of learning. These are the skills you need to do well in life. Things that include like knowing how you're feeling and how to manage your feelings, getting along with others, coping with stress. Goodness knows we've all had lots of that to deal with. Motivating yourself and working towards your goals. Knowing who you are, what your identity is, and thinking creatively. These skills are essential and really start developing when children are infants and continue into adulthood. Next slide. We listened to your input, as we've said, and formed the presentation around the 3 areas you identified. And that includes the resilience. And parents and caregivers ask for ideas for helping them with their children to develop skills to help them bounce back during this challenging time. They recognize these skills are essential for their child's overall well-being. If we really support our child's well-being, they'll also do better academically at school. Relationships. During our absence from the school building, we all recognize the important role that relationships play in learning. It's vital that we focus on getting back to basics and making sure our students feel safe enough to play and learn by connecting with each other and school staff. And the last one, and I think we're all been challenged with this, is around routines. The importance of keeping a regular schedule, providing a sense of control, predictability, calm, and well-being, all things that are very necessary. Next.
So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about resilience, or our ability to bounce back during challenging times. And this includes a focus, as we mentioned, on social and emotional learning. Next.
Sorry, Margaret, I think we just have to move down a couple slides, please. Great, perfect, thank you. Hi, I'm Dana Morris, and I'm a member of Psychological Services in the Toronto District School Board.
And I'm Chevalier Taylor. I'm a speech language pathologist with the Toronto District School Board.
And we're going to speak with you tonight about social emotional learning. We'd also like to acknowledge Andrea Wiltsey, a wonderful occupational therapist at the school board, for helping us put together this presentation. Thank you, Andrea. In the previous presentation, Heather and Shelley introduced us to the concept of social emotional learning and highlighted how essential it is for good mental health and well-being and for improving resilience. In this presentation, we'll take a look at the core social emotional learning skills, talk about their benefits, and discuss some strategies that you can try at home. Next, please. Social emotional learning skills help us to be more successful in life. These skills are needed to start and keep friendships, complete tasks, manage our feelings, and stay positive. They help us better understand ourselves, and also help us understand and connect with others. When we're more comfortable with ourselves and less stressed, we deal with problems and challenges in healthier and more effective ways. More than 20 years of research shows that developing social emotional learning skills has long-term and widespread effects. These benefits include improved academic achievement and classroom behavior. There are also many mental health benefits as well, such as better ability to manage stress and depression. Students also show more positive attitudes about themselves, others, and school. Strong social emotional learning skills help us tolerate frustrations, focus better, and feel less lonely. And these effects can still be seen after 18 years and are associated with reduced poverty and police involvement. So as you can see, social emotional learning is beneficial for children and adults at any time, but it's particularly important now to give our children the tools they need to manage the current challenges. Next, please. So what exactly is social emotional learning? School Mental Health Ontario has identified 6 key skills, which include identification and management of emotions, stress management and coping, positive motivation and perseverance, healthy relationship skills, self-awareness and sense of identity, and lastly, critical and creative thinking. So we'll now spend some time briefly talking about each of these areas. We'll then provide some strategies for you to try at home to help your children learn to identify and manage their emotions. Strategies to address some of the other skills will be covered in other presentations later this evening. Okay, so the first area is the identification and management of emotions. Even as adults, we are experiencing a range of emotions about returning to learning, and we're sure our children will be feeling many big feelings as well. When children understand the relationship between thoughts, feelings, and actions and can accurately identify emotions in themselves and others, they're better able to express their feelings and regulate their behavior. Next, please. The second skill area is stress management and coping. And we've all been doing a lot of stress management these days. Returning to learning is going to be a big transition, and periods of transition can be stressful. In addition, we know that learning environments will be different than they were before. Now more than ever, it will be important to teach our children effective coping skills to overcome challenges both big and small. Helping children develop a range of strategies to draw on will help them bounce back and support overall resilience. The third area is positive motivation and perseverance. For our children, learning in September may be more challenging than usual, whether they are in the classroom or learning from home. To achieve their goals, kids need to stay positive and persevere through difficult tasks and obstacles. Adopting an optimistic view is a good habit of thought that can be learned and practiced at school.
And the next skill area is healthy relationship skills. So many of our kids have not been able to see their friends while at home. Connections with teachers and other caring adults have also been limited. So when returning to school, focusing on building social skills and reestablishing these connections will be very important. Being able to build and maintain friendships, communicate effectively, resolve conflicts, and work as part of a team are skills that are foundational at school, work, and beyond. Relationship skills can be learned and practiced at school, and focusing on this area can benefit classroom culture and sense of belonging. Next. Self-awareness and sense of identity. So as our kids return to school, they may require some support to help them determine how and where they fit in. Supporting self-awareness and encouraging self-confidence can help kids value their uniqueness and to appreciate their identity. Having a sense of who they are in the context of culture and community may help kids see how they matter and can contribute to the world around them. Next. Lastly, we have critical and creative thinking. So this school year, our children will be faced with new situations and challenges. Developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills will help them successfully address these challenges, make good choices, consider the consequences of their actions, and the well-being of self and others. Executive functioning skills, such as planning, task focus, creative problem solving, time management, and organization, help children to be successful in academic tasks and prepare them for increasingly complex demands. Next. So we will now discuss some strategies that you can use at home to support identifying and managing emotions. It's important to note that these strategies work best if you teach them when your child's in a state of calm and not when they're upset or in the moment, so that they can learn and consolidate the new knowledge. Next. So in order to identify, understand, and respond to emotions in oneself and others in a healthy manner, children need to have the language skills to do so. As caring adults, we can help them develop emotional literacy with the following strategies. So to help your child begin to understand and express basic emotions, help them label their own feelings. So for example, it looks like you're feeling frustrated or excited, and you can reinforce the use of these feeling words. You can also name and label your own feelings, talk about the things that make you happy, upset, frustrated, and model how you manage those emotions. So for example, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm going to take a break. You can also model deep breathing during times of anger or frustration. You can also help your child recognize and understand how someone else, so a peer, an adult, a book character, how they might be feeling by pointing out their facial expressions, their body language, tone of voice, or words. Next. It's also important to acknowledge your children's feelings of worry or concern. So let your child know that their feelings are normal. It's okay to feel nervous when you're unsure of what's coming. This is new for everyone, and new can sometimes be scary or feel hard. Lots of people likely are having similar feelings and worries, and they're not alone. So you can say things like, I understand why you're feeling worried since the school year is going to be so different from what you're used to. Labeling and validating your child's feelings will help them identify their feelings and also help them feel understood and comforted. Ensure that they realize that all feelings are okay. It's what we do with the feelings that's important. Next. There are also some strategies that you can try at home with younger children or those with special needs. So reading books during story time can be a great way to teach emotion words. You can go through the book and pre-teach with your child and help create simple student-friendly definitions. So the storybooks do not actually have to be explicitly about the feelings. For example, the story Franklin in the Dark is not about the feeling words, but the words within the book, such as worried and brave, are rich emotional vocabulary words, and they can be defined in a student-friendly way. And the facial expressions and the visuals in the book can also help to support learning the new vocabulary. I'd also like to point out that there are some additional TDSB resources that were created by the Speech and Language Department with more strategies and ways to support identifying and managing emotions. And that will be provided in a follow-up resource document. Next. And so thank you for listening. The next presentation also relates to developing resilience by finding ways to cope with uncertainty.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeremy Ng, and I am a social worker at the board.
Hi, and I'm also a social worker at the board. My name is Nicole McSweeney, and we will be hosting this section of the presentation. We'd also like to acknowledge that there were many other people who contributed to the information we're presenting. Afshan Siddiqui and Fiona Curry from the Psychological Services Department, Yvonne Wyndham from Speech Language Pathology, and Jocelyn Lay from Physiotherapy.
So I know you've probably been hearing a lot of information tonight. Don't feel like you have to get it all right. Don't feel like you have to know everything. We're all doing the best we can. There's no need to make ourselves as parents feel like we aren't doing enough. So if you can just pick even one or two things from this whole night and practice that, that will be great. We're going to offer a few more tips around coping with uncertainty, since pretty much uncertainty is the only thing we're certain about these days. So if both us as adults and as children and our children can learn to cope with some uncertainty, it'll help our mental health and our well-being. We can try to focus on some of the positives and some of the things within our control instead of the negative and things out of our control. Next slide, please. So what is uncertainty? You know, normally when our children get ready to go back to school, we normally use our past experiences to help us. We'll say things like, well, remember what it was like last year when you had to get up early for school? Well, what helped with that? Or remember meeting a new teacher and how nervous you were? What was helpful then? But this year, unfortunately, no one's going to really know what's going to happen because we don't have those past experiences. So it can be helpful to talk with them about uncertainty. And a kid-friendly definition is when you just don't know something will happen for sure. And here's a quote just to illustrate about the unknown and the worries often associated with it. You know, we do not fear the unknown, we fear what we think we know about the unknown. Next slide, please. And so as school approaches, or even after the first few weeks, we might see some changes in the following emotions or behaviors due to uncertainty. We might see a constant need for reassurance. It could be like a verbal reassurance or even just feeling like a lot more physical touch. Our children might be trying to overplan, or you might see some physical symptoms like sleeping or eating difficulties, or being even more irritable or avoidant of activities that they normally would like to do. And we've been talking about feelings, and I find this iceberg picture a helpful one. First, let's ask, well, what is underneath the behavior? What are they thinking and feeling, as we talked about in the last section, so that we can name and validate it? Next slide, please. And so we want to kind of get to resilience so that we don't just struggle with behaviors, but we're able to bounce back from the challenge of uncertainty. We want to have those skills ourselves and be able to teach them to our children. Next slide, please. And so one of the ways we do this is through self-regulation. It's how we manage our own stress and emotions by the actions we can take. So it can be as simple as taking a deep breath, journaling, doing art, talking with a friend, being physically active. Now for kids, they haven't quite learned how to do this yet. And oftentimes we'll need help from caregivers to help them manage. So something simple like, hey, let's take some breaths together. And it's important that, as we've been talking about, we take care of ourselves as caregivers first so that we can support our children. Next slide, please. And so as we help our kids cope with uncertainty, we kind of start from the bottom, right? We want to check in on their physical needs first, as much as you're able to, whether it's being able to eat well or sleep well. And as we move up to love and belong, to being able to be cared for and encouraged, to share their feelings, not being told that what they say or what they're feeling is wrong or being judged for that, but just saying that, hey, we understand. It doesn't excuse their behaviors, but just to know that they are loved in their home. Next slide, please. And as we help our children cope, we prepare what we can, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge fan of surprises, right? And no, we can't control everything that's going to happen at school, but we can try to prepare our children for as much as we can to help reduce any feelings of anxiety, right? So we might want to talk with our older children about what school might look like, some different rules that they might expect. For younger or even children with special needs, even using visuals to help them understand what they can expect. We'll talk a lot more about routines later on, so pay attention about what might be useful to get them back into a routine.
Okay, so hi everybody. In addition to identifying, accepting, and validating emotions, trying to understand what might be underneath those emotions, taking care of everyone's basic needs, and preparing for what you can, another strategy to help children cope with uncertainty is to shift their attention to things they can control, positive things in their lives, and focusing on the present moment. So we'll go through each of these three things, and we're going to start with the circles of control. Next slide, please. So we've heard the word uncertainty a lot, and what I'd like to say about uncertainty is what I find is that it's difficult to know what to expect or what is expected of us. And when things are uncertain, there are many things that feel out of our control and often are out of our control. What happens is that this sometimes can lead to increased stress, increased worry, increased anxiety, because when we don't feel in control, what we often do feel is overwhelmed and helpless. So to help address the uncertainty and any feelings of being helpless or out of control, we can try and refocus on the areas we can control and help our kids do the same. So on this slide, you can see in the green circle are things that children and kids do have some control over as they're returning to school. Some of these are related to just general return to school. Some are a little bit more specific to this year with the COVID-19 limitations. One of the areas I'd like to point your attention to in this slide is the top icon in the green circle, which is positive thoughts. And if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So you've probably heard about positive thinking, positive self-talk, showing gratitude. And we've already heard earlier today why this is important, because our thoughts affect our feelings, which affect our actions and behaviors. And if we can think positively about something, we'll often feel better and we'll be better able to adapt and address anything that we come across. So showing gratitude, it's actually not that difficult to try and incorporate that into your family's life. Sitting around the dinner table, tucking your kids into bed, it can be just as simple as saying, what are you thankful for today? What am I thankful for today? What made you happy today? Some kids who like to write or journal could keep what we call a gratitude journal, which is really just a diary where they list items that they are grateful for. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a variety of different coping thoughts. So if a student or a child or a teen or even an adult resonates with any of these coping thoughts or can come up with one on their own, it's something that you can repeat to yourself almost like a mantra. So when things are tough, when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling a little bit worried, feeling a little bit anxious about something, you can go to that positive thought to remind yourself that you're going to be okay and that you are going to get through it. What I would say are the three basic messages in positive self-talk and positive thinking are also on the screen in front of you. So just reminding yourself, I have gotten through hard things before, and I do have strategies to deal with hard situations. Also, a reminder that this is new for everybody, and as we already heard, new can be scary, new can be hard. And I will get better at this. It will take practice, but I will get better and it will get easier. And the last point to remember is that you're not alone, that you can always ask for help if you need it. Thank you. Next slide. And focusing on the present. So focusing on the present is about trying to shift your and your children's attention from the uncertain future to the present moment. So you can do this by engaging in mindfulness activities. So here's a basic definition about what mindfulness is, but basically all it is about being aware of what we're thinking, feeling, and doing in the present moment without any kind of judgment attached to it. So as you can see from the picture on this slide, when you're in the present, you're not thinking about what's happened in the past, which you can't change anyways. And you're also not thinking about anything in the uncertain future that might be causing anxiety. You are in the present moment. There are many mindfulness apps and online videos that you can find. And a lot of people think that you need to have a really long time to sit down and do this effectively. But actually, there's many apps where there are 2 or 5 minute mindfulness routines. And that's sometimes all you need to just ground yourself. So what I'm going to do now is actually take you through a very short mindfulness activity. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. So I'm hoping that everyone who is with us could look around and just note 5 things that you see. The first 5 things that you notice. You don't have to attach any value to it. It's just, what are you seeing? Great. Now I'd like everyone, and sometimes I find it's helpful if you close your eyes, but it's up to you. If you could identify 4 things that you hear. So you might be hearing my voice. You could be hearing a lawnmower or a dog barking outside your window. Could be hearing something in your family's apartment. Okay. Now I'd like you to try and identify and note 3 things that you're feeling right now. So it could be the chair you're sitting on, the way your feet are touching the floor. It could be whether you're hot or cold. Could even be an emotion that you're feeling. 3 things. Now I'd like you to try and identify 2 things that you are smelling. And once you've done that, 1 thing that you might be tasting right now. So as you can see, we're just incorporating our senses to bring us in the present moment. And what I'm hoping is that for those of you that joined in the activity, that while you were identifying the things you were seeing, feeling, smelling, tasting, you weren't thinking about something that had happened earlier in the day or something that was happening tomorrow, but that you were just in the moment. Next slide, please. For younger children and children with special needs, mindfulness can be as simple as just learning how to breathe. We talk about breathing being a superpower because if you are able to do deep breathing, it can calm your nervous system as well as your mind. So to teach children, younger children or children with special needs, there's a couple different ways you can teach this breathing technique. So you can have them hold a real flower, a toy flower, or even just imagine they're holding a flower and ask them to smell the flower. So they're breathing in through their nose. Then you're going to ask them to blow on the petals. So they're breathing out through their mouth. So similar to using the pinwheel that you see in the picture, you ask them to breathe in through their nose to take a deep, deep breath through their nose so that they can blow out through their mouth and make the pinwheel move. And as other panelists have suggested, there are going to be other resources and suggestions in a digital resource list that is going to be sent out, I believe, at the end of the evening. Okay. And this last slide for this part of the presentation is a list of coping tools. So this is just an example of a list of different coping tools that can and might be helpful for different people. And what you can do is you can personalize this list to work and make it reflect what works for you or your child. You can download images from the internet, you can draw pictures yourself, you can have handwritten lists. But what we suggest is if every child returning to school has a list of coping tools, 5 or 10, I would suggest, that they can refer to when they're feeling uncertain or worried or anxious, that it will be helpful, a helpful way for them to deal with those feelings. I want to just let people know that not all coping strategies work for all people, and not all coping strategies work in all situations. So that's why it's nice to have a list. So if you try one and it doesn't work, you can try something else to see if that's a bit more helpful at that moment. You can see from the list that there's kind of 2 categories. So some are helpful to calm down and focus, similar to the mindfulness exercise that we just did a few minutes ago. And some strategies are more active, and they're meant to get your body moving and getting yourself active. So on that note, I'd like to encourage everyone to take a few seconds to just take a quick stretch while we transition to the next part of our presentation, which is about the important role that relationships play in your children's learning. You can go on to the next slide now.
Okay, thank you, Nicole and Jeremy. My name is Alana Lowe, and I'm a Student Equity Program Advisor, and I'll be talking a little bit more about relationships. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So relationships and student success have always gone hand in hand, but since the school closures, we realize now how important school relationships are, not just to academic success, but really how important they are just to sense of well-being and belonging. So things like school clubs and extracurricular activities, they affirm identity and connection. Next slide, please. And okay, so we can also skip this one too. Thank you. So common questions we received from parents were on fostering and strengthening relationships during remote learning. So how do you build relationships through remote learning platforms like Google Classroom? And how might you connect with teachers and staff outside of those platforms via email or phone? So before I touch on a few strategies, we can go to the next slide. I think it's really important to just mention how relationships may be impacted by student identity and whether they have a strong sense of belonging or feeling connected to their school or their school community. So we know that students feel included. We know that students that feel included at school, they're more likely to have positive and healthy relationships. And we also know that students that feel excluded, they're more likely to have negative experiences and feel less supported at school. So there are several reasons for why someone feels excluded or has a low sense of belonging. And sometimes it's directly connected to their identities. So a student's sense of their body image, the way that they see themselves, that might impact their relationships at school. Their sexual identity or their gender identity, or the way that they express their identities might impact the way that they're treated or their interactions at school. So their religious beliefs, race, their social class, the neighborhoods that they come from, the language that they speak, their immigration status, all these things can be hard for students to develop positive and healthy relationships because students and families are experiencing challenges that are very unique to them. So you can go to the next slide. So a big concern shared by students was on how limited interactions might impact relationships and student well-being. So this chart is just some findings from a 2020 preliminary summary report for the TDSB Return to School Parent, Caregiver, and Student Survey. 59% of parents were concerned that interactions with friends won't be like they used to. 49% were concerned about their children's ability to cope with the new reality of school. And 45% were worried about how they would readjust to school life. So I'm just sharing this data to let you know that you're not alone with your concerns, and that students, families, and staff, they share similar concerns when it comes to relationships and the new reality presented from remote and virtual learning. We can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So how can we build and strengthen relationships when we're unable to interact and connect in the ways that we used to? So here are just a few strategies that I hope can help. Firstly, I just want to say that building and strengthening relationships, it takes time, and it takes a lot of several like small steps. But there's small steps that I think that can be taken day to day, week to week. So the first one that I would say would be connecting with as many staff in your school that you can connect with. So first would be definitely connecting with the classroom or course teachers. That's definitely vital. But I think it's really important that you connect with the admin and the support staff too. So this can be done by sending an email to the principal or the VP at your school. You can find out the names of the principal and the VP at your school by just typing in your school name in Google, and it should come, the website will come up, and the names are usually listed there. So it's usually the first name dot the last name at tdsb.on.ca. You can also ask your teacher for their emails too, and that's really just to send the staff or the principal and the VP, just to send them an email asking them for a list of the support staff that are assigned to your school. So Jocelyn will be providing more information about what support staff there are available and pretty much how they can support you. So that will be presented later on in the presentation. I think it's also really important to connect with the teacher virtually. So outside of like telephone or email, you can connect with teachers through comment sections on Google Classroom or bulletin boards or social media if they use it for learning. Parent councils, oh, sorry, we're gonna go back to the other slide, still on that one. Yep, so parent councils and committees, I would highly suggest that you get connected with, and if you have time, get involved in that. I understand that, you know, some of you might be working when meetings are held and you may not have the time to go to meetings or to support council activities, but you can request to be put on an email list so they can keep you updated about what's going on. I would also say connect with community organizations in your local community. That's another way to build relationships with the school from outside of the school. So some schools already have strong relationships with local community organizations like the Boys and Girls Club or after school programs. So definitely ask the teacher, ask the principal, ask your child and youth counselor or your child and youth worker or your student equity program advisor about what organizations will be a best fit for you. So outside of those tips that I shared, I would also say that it's really important to learn about TDSB policies and procedures, ones that existed before the closures, and also keeping updated with new policies and things that might be put in place now that we're in remote learning. I think it's really important that you as a parent understand your rights as a parent and you understand your child's rights as a student. So you can Google TDSB policies and they'll come up. Just type in TDSB, policies, procedures, all that stuff will come up. There might be a time where you might need to advocate for your child. And I think it's really important that you're supported through that process. So what I would encourage you to connect with support staff if you can, because they can also help you during that time. Student leadership opportunities, they're also a really great way for your child to build positive and supportive relationships at school. So I know with remote learning, many in-class activities will continue to remain on hold, but there will be remote learning opportunities like leadership clubs and equity groups. Those will be offered to students. So please, again, ask teachers and admin about that. And hopefully that might also go out through emails or through regular communication too. So we can go to the next slide. If you need additional support, I would definitely urge you. I think sometimes we're hesitant to reach out to teachers or to the principal or to the VP if we're having an issue or if a problem comes up because we feel like it's not our place. Some parents are very comfortable with that, but parents that might not have strong relationships or connections definitely might experience some challenges or barriers requesting additional support. So I would definitely say start by talking to someone that you're comfortable. And if you're not comfortable or if you don't have any relationships with the teachers or staff in your school, seek out additional support from a leader within your community or community-based organization. So that is it for relationships. The next presentation is about regular routines and organizing your day as another way to provide a sense of well-being.
Thanks, Alana. Hi, everyone. My name is Afshan Siddiqui, and I'm a psychologist with the TDSB.
And my name's Yvonne Wyndham. I'm a speech language pathologist at the board.
And we are going to be talking about establishing routines in uncertain times. And this presentation was also developed by Jocelyn Lay, I hope I got it right this time, who is a physiotherapist, and Fiona Curry, who is another psychologist with the board. So if your family is anything like mine, I'm sure your routines have probably been pretty irregular lately. Things I think are a little bit better for us now, but initially when this whole school closure and pandemic business started, we were pretty much in our pajamas 24/7 and making a lot of banana bread for some reason. How about you, Yvonne? How have your routines been?
Well, I'll take your banana bread and raise you by soda bread too. So I was.
Oh, wow, fancy.
And our routines definitely are still a little out of whack.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Ours are as well. But I think now that we're going back to school and back to work, it'll be important to try to go back to some of our regular routines as well, because they are important to our mental health. And I think Heather briefly mentioned some of that initially. But especially now with the world feeling a little bit chaotic and out of control, it's nice to have some of that normalcy that routines can give us. So if we go on to our next slide, we have a comic, Calvin and Hobbes comic, that kind of just shows us one of the benefits of having routines. So Calvin has decided initially that he's going to try a different cereal. He's going to change things up and make things exciting for himself. And by the end, he realizes that this new cereal doesn't have the chocolate frosting that he knows and loves. And he decides to go back to what he finds comforting in his regular routine.
So why are routines important, Afshan? I mean, why are we even talking about it?
Yeah, so if we go on to our next slide, we have a whole list of reasons, and this isn't everything. We couldn't fit it in the time that we have, but just to give you an idea of some of the reasons why. And we've kind of touched on a bit of the first one already. So routines give us structure, they give us consistency, they give us a sense of control because we know what we're getting into and what we can expect. And when we know what we can expect, it also lessens the stress and the anxiety that we are feeling because we're doing something familiar that we've likely done many, many times. And because of that, we're also more confident because we have repeatedly done something. And so we're getting better at whatever it is that we're doing over time and becoming more independent as well.
So just give us a couple of examples then, if that's okay.
Sure. So if we go on to our next slide, there's a few home examples. So we've talked already about what we wear, so not wearing pajamas all the time. We've talked about cereal routines. Right now we are, I think, going to have a little bit of a difficult time readjusting our bedtime routines, our sleep routines, because our bedtimes are kind of all over the place and wake up times are all over the place. But really, we can have routines for anything because routines are just habits that we form through repetition.
So could you just give us a little example of how to establish a routine, if you don't mind?
Yep. So on our next slide, we will start off. If you can take us to the next slide, Margaret. So a lot of these concepts, oh, stop right there. So a lot of these concepts may be familiar to you, but we just wanted to kind of give you a refresher because we are going back to school and back to work for some of us. But if any of these concepts are new and you've learned something, then all the better. But basically, you would want to start with a familiar routine. In our example here, it's the morning routine. And what you want to do is give your children choices. So Margaret, if you can click one more time. So or actually 2 more times, you would give your children choices. And in this example, if you click once more, we have make your bed or make breakfast. And the choices don't necessarily just have to be the activities that you're asking your children to do. It could also be the timing of when the activities are done. So you can make your bed now, or you can make your bed after breakfast. Okay, so if we click one more time, I just want to remind everyone to incorporate breaks as much as you can into your routines, especially if you're having your children do something quite lengthy in nature or more academic. They do need those little brain breaks to just move and to stretch. And then if we click one more time, we can see that motivators are also really important in a routine, especially when you're first getting them started, because it kind of gives your children the reason or the why they're doing what they're doing, right? So in this situation, it could be things like an easy way to do this is through like a first then kind of strategy, where the first is what you're asking your child to do, and then the then is the motivator. So make your bed, and then you can go to the park, or in this example here, playtime, you can play.
I'm usually motivated by chocolate, but you know, I'm sure that
yeah, will work for chocolate for me too. And there's lots of different motivators that you can use, so it doesn't have to be necessarily like an object or an activity. It could really even be something as simple as one-on-one time with a parent, or maybe going to visit a grandparent. Really, you should maybe just sit down with your children and talk to them to see what would work for them. Okay, so if we can go on to our next slide, we just wanted to give you some ideas of schedules, checklists, and notifications. And if you just click it one more time, we also have some more electronic-based schedules and checklists. And schedules and checklists are a good way of just trying to make our routines more structured and predictable. And there's like I said, a range of schedules and checklists. So it could be really simple and visual, especially for younger kids who may even need pictures of themselves doing the activities to kind of understand what's needed, to more text-based or electronic for older kids. When you're building your routines, make sure that you do include some time for fun or wellness kinds of activities. And remember that some kids may need a little bit of extra support when you're switching between tasks, or what we call transitions, to kind of cue them, to let them know that it's time to move on to something. And so right in the bottom right-hand corner, we have an example of a timer. So just a time timer that goes off to let them know it's time to move on to something new.
sounds good.
So Yvonne is now going to talk to us about some of the old routines that maybe we've kind of lost track of over time during this period, as well as some very new routines I think our kids will have to deal with.
Absolutely. So if you go on to the next slide, Margaret, thanks. So as parents or caregivers, it's a good idea for you to use routines to help your children practice skills so that you can prepare them in advance for any new activities that are coming up, or even this new normal that we're going to be having when we get back to school. And if you do that, if you get them to practice a little bit in advance, you can actually help them become a little more independent with these skills and bring down any anxiety. You know, if they're worried a little bit, you can actually minimize that. And just in the next couple of slides, so if you can go on to the next one, Margaret. So one more before that, Margaret, sorry.
apologize. In order to increase that buy-in, it's a good idea that if you're trying to establish a routine for going back to school, have your older child or any age, if you like, if you think they can manage, to sort of be a part of what their schedule should look like, particularly if whether they're going into school physically or whether they are going to be doing more remote learning at home. Have them involved in the discussions. The more input that they have, the more likely they're going to follow the routines and actually keep to the schedule. And for older children who've been sleeping in, Afshan, we've talked about this a lot. How's your teenage boy doing at home?
Oh, oh my goodness, like it's record breaking at times. He rolls out of bed when he wants.
That's right. I'm always saying that he could, mine anyway, could sleep for Canada and an Olympic medal. So older children that have been sleeping in, just like our kids, they're going to have a much more, their sleep schedule is not going to be that regular. So it's a good idea to try and get them to readjust to a better sleep schedule at least a couple of weeks before when you think school's going to start. I know we've got a date now, but you never know. So even now, starting now to get them to do that is a good idea. And if you can, build in some time before bed, at least an hour before, where you're not going to have any devices at all. Have them unplug, no screens, to help them to promote that kind of sleep cycle that you're trying to get to be more regular. And even calming music or mindfulness, anything like that, deep breathing, to kind of get them going into sleep. And when they wake up, they could do some exercise, not just before bed, better that they do it in the morning, and get some sun exposure as well. You can move on, Margaret. And even for younger kids, it's probably more important to establish a routine, especially if that younger child has special needs. So something as simple as going out, you can practice whatever the routine is of leaving your home and coming back, any kind of trip outside, and set some clear and specific rules. So for instance, you might ask their permission to hold their hand before you cross the road, anything like that. Obviously, in this time that we are in right now, there are going to be new health measures. So even practicing putting on the mask and using the loops around your ears rather than the front, anything like that is good, but keeping the tone light. Not helping, not having our kids become anxious because of what they're hearing in the news or this, that, and the other. So limit that kind of exposure. Move on.
And we do have a tip sheet also that
I'm going to mention that at the end.
Yeah. Okay,
and the routines for going back to school or having remote learning, even for older children, if you have the space, it's a good idea to sort of designate that space for their learning, if at all possible, and make sure the materials are organized and no clutter, anything like that. Set clear expectations. You might be working at home as well. Perhaps you have them work at a time when you're free so that if they have any questions, they can ask you, and set goals for the day. So if they have certain tasks, you could do it for the whole morning. Set out what the expectations or the goals would be for that particular portion of the day, or the entire day if you feel your child can manage that. But all the while, make sure you plan frequent breaks to help them to be more productive in the end. We also have, Margaret, you can move on. For younger children, don't forget to get them comfortable if you do end up having a little bit of a space for them. And if they have a device at home, it could be a computer, but some of our special needs children have other devices. Have them practice switching it on, logging in, doing some tasks, anything like that before school actually starts. And you might actually, last slide, Margaret, for our bit, you might actually need to use visuals to help with them, with children, so that they can understand what the rules and expectations of work time are. For instance, on this screen, you have one of the visuals on here is a cue card that shows kids what they should be doing when you're on the phone or if you're on the computer as a parent or the adult in the house. I know that Ashan and we spoke very fast. So
Because we don't expect you to have a photographic memory or remember everything that we've said, we do have most of what we've talked about, especially the last few slides with the visuals and different tips and strategies for establishing routine, in a digital tip sheet, which you will get access to. So you'll have access to all of our information. In fact, the whole presentation will have some sort of link in that digital piece. And then the final part of our presentation by our colleagues, so you can move on, Margaret, and click one more time. The final part of our presentation by our colleagues is going to give a brief overview of our professions to the school board and how you can access our services in the TDSB, as well as community resources.
Thank you, Yvonne and Afshan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Lay. I'm a physiotherapist with Occupational and Physiotherapy Services at the TDSB, and I'm going to be presenting this last part of our presentation. I wanted to thank you two other individuals who contributed to this presentation, who are Annette Grassi, who's a social worker with the board, and Shelley Moretti, who's a psychologist with the board. So with respect to mental health and well-being resources and steps to accessing supports in your child's school and the community, I will give us a quick summary on that. Next slide, please. So here's a list of the professional support staff that are in your child's school in the various disciplines that are available to your children's school teams for support. So starting with social work and attendance services. So social workers provide support to children, their families, and school teams around issues of mental health and well-being. And these services include crisis intervention, individual or group counseling, as well as helping to connect families with supports within the TDSB and the community, and providing support to children and their families in dealing with school attendance issues. Our psychological services, those associates possess specialized training in child development, learning, and mental health and well-being. And in collaboration with families and school teams, they support mental health and well-being by conducting comprehensive psychoeducational assessments, providing individual and group counseling, consulting with schools, classrooms, and families, as well as collaborating with community agencies to coordinate and link supports. Child and youth workers promote success for all learners and foster emotional, social, and well-being of children. They advocate for and empower our kids to make meaningful choices and decisions, and they provide support to ensure access, opportunities, foster school connections, and support transitions within the TDSB and the broader community. Occupational therapists and physiotherapists are specialized in supporting children with their activities of daily living skills, fine and gross motor skills, sensory processing needs, self-regulation, and mental health and well-being. Through comprehensive assessments and consultations with the school teams, we also evaluate needs for assistive equipment for children. And our main goal is to maximize and optimize student function, participation, and inclusion in the school setting. Speech-language pathologists are concerned with the prevention, identification, assessment, treatment, and rehabilitation of communication and or swallowing disorders in children and adults. They also support children and schools with language development and communication, and provide education and counseling services for educators and parents. Our student equity program advisors advocate for marginalized and underserved children throughout the TDSB. They focus on creating opportunities and access for kids to foster their greatest achievement, well-being, and engagement. Next slide, please. Any of the aforementioned supports can be accessed through your school support team. And as a parent, your first connection would be someone in your local school setting, such as a teacher, vice principal, principal, special education, guidance, or alternately, if you're already involved with a professional support services staff member, you can coordinate with them as well. Next slide, please. After a referral is made to a member of our professional support staff, the service provider will call to offer and explain service and obtain consent. They will also explain confidentiality and the rules around it. And just so you're aware, interpretation phone services are available for all exchanges or interactions with caregivers. Next slide, please. Here are a list of community resources that provide mental health supports and assistance. These resources will also be included in a list that will be shared with you for your own reference at your own leisure. Just in particular, if you are feeling that you need urgent support, you can access that through WhatsApp Walk-In. This is a support that is offered across the city. It is similar to medical walk-in clinics, and presently they're offering support on the phone or online through the internet. Next slide, please. These resources listed above provide strategies and education on preventative measures and ideas on how to address mental health concerns such as social emotional learning through videos, books, and other formats. 211 is a service that helps you navigate the many service providers within the community quickly and easily to promote health and well-being, and provides additional support for marginalized populations as well. Next slide, please. So we're now moving to our parent breakout rooms where we will have the chance to meet in smaller groups. There are 2 TDSB staff members who will be moderating each group, and there will be 3 guiding questions. How are relationships helpful for your child's learning and well-being? How can these relationships be fostered moving forward? Number 2 is how can routines be supportive in the return to learning? Are there specific routines you find helpful? And number 3, how have you been surprised by your children's resilience, coping skills during this time? So participants, you will notice that there are 7 breakout groups that we have created, each with its own focus. Some groups are more general in nature and are based on different age groupings, while others are more specialized and will be focusing on more specific concerns or issues. So if you have multiple children of different needs and or different age groups, please pick the group that you think would be best suited for your family, and don't worry about missing out, as the groups will all be discussing many of the same issues. Unfortunately, we are running a bit late this evening, so we will be extending the breakout rooms to 8:15 as well.
I think Zena was gonna say something at this point. Zena?
Good evening again, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank all the parents and caregivers who have joined us tonight and are going to be continuing some really important conversations in the breakout rooms. Also like to remind people that PIAC does have a website, and if you go to the TDSB website this evening or afterwards, it'll actually offer resources for parents as well, and even school councils. But again, thank you very much to all the professional staff and student equity staff that were joining us tonight, and will continue on in the breakout rooms. And thank you very much, Heather and Carlene Jackson, for being here tonight. Thank you, everyone.